Welcome. My name is John Brooker, and it is my great pleasure to be your host for this session of the series, Discovering the Divine Principles of Restoration. This is the most exciting part of our series because it is not so much about theory as it is with the reality of how God has been working through human history to restore the ideal that was lost in the fall. The divine principle covers three areas: the ideal of God's creation, the fall, and restoration. The first three sessions of this series, we talked about the ideal of creation, that men and women were to grow to maturity in heart, inheriting God's love. And then they were to come together in marriage, in the most beautiful union of love, and give birth to children. In the following two sessions, we talked about the fall, and we learned about God's ideal of love was lost. We learned that love itself was turned into a self-centered direction. The first family was not an extension of God's love. It became the extension of a love that was based on deceit, temptation, and seduction. Now in this session we are going to learn about the principles of restoration, those principles by which God has been working to restore us to our proper place as His children, fulfilling the original ideal of the family. Restoration is about human history, and it can seem a bit random. When God looks at history, however, it has a real goal. And if we can understand how and where God has been trying to lead human history, then we will be able to help to get it there. Why do we need God's Son, or what some religions refer to as the Messiah? In the fall, through the misuse of love, God lost His Son and His daughter. They began a family that was separated from God's love. Let's go back to the analogy of a tree. The fallen family that Adam and Eve started became like a seed that brought forth a tree we call humanity. That tree is rooted in the fallen love. You can't change the nature of that tree without changing the root. And you can't change a root by fiddling with the leaves and branches. The only way you can get a tree that is rooted in God is by planting a new seed. This is the meaning of the coming of the Messiah. God's responsibility in the work of restoring the ideal of creation is to send the new Adam. And that concept of a new Adam is what religions have come to call the Messiah. This is a person who is able to overcome temptation, who does not fall as the first Adam did, who God can proclaim to be His true Son and bridegroom. But that is not enough. To create a new seed, there must be the feminine essence as well. The fall was caused by a man and a woman. To fix the fall, to create the seed that can bring forth God's original ideal, a world in which we are able to inherit God's love, the new Adam must be able to find a woman whom God can proclaim to be His true daughter and Adam's bride. When there is such a man and a woman who can be blessed by God in marriage and create a family that is rooted in God's love, then a way will be opened for all people of the world to be restored. What has commonly been referred to in religion as salvation will in fact be a process of being adopted into God's family. This is why Jesus spoke about the need for us to be born again, John 3:3. And it is why St. Paul spoke about the need for us to be adopted, Romans 8:23. In order to be fully redeemed, we were born as children of the fallen parents, Adam and Eve. In order to return to God, we need to be born again. And to be born again requires both a father and a mother. It requires parents who God can proclaim the true parents. But there is a problem. God cannot easily send the Messiah. Why? Because we fallen humanity have our portion of responsibility. God requires that we do something before He sends the Messiah, the new Adam. The big question which was asked in the introduction of this series is, what is it that we need to do for God to send the Messiah? The simple answer is that God wants us to prepare a foundation upon which He can send the Messiah. To create such a foundation, God is asking that we reverse what happened in the fall. This is our responsibility, to reverse what we did wrong in the fall. The term we are going to use for this act of reversing the fall is indemnity. The term indemnity is usually used in banking, but here we are giving it a spiritual meaning. Indemnity means to reverse the mistakes that were made in the fall. Whenever you want to restore something that is broken or fallen, you go the reverse way. For example, if you dropped a glass and everything spilled, you would want to reverse the damage you did by picking up the glass, cleaning up the mess, and refilling it. This is true for everything. If I lost your trust by telling you a lie, I would need to reverse that by apologizing and then by demonstrating to you that I can be trusted after all. The basic idea of restoration is very simple. If God can find someone who is willing to do things that reverse the fall, that person will move closer to God. Their good nature will become stronger and their fallen nature will become weaker. When this happens, God will send the Messiah. Or on the other hand, if we do things that repeat the fall, if we act upon our fallen nature, this will cause our fallen nature to become stronger. This is the kind of person that will be more easily influenced to do evil. When this happens, God cannot send the Messiah. The bad news here is that our fallen nature is much stronger than our good nature. It has been developed over many hundreds of generations. In fact, it is the case that often when you do bad things, you often get an immediate reward or benefit. But if you try to do good, you are often opposed and attacked. This is why good people such as Joan of Arc, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr. are often attacked and even killed. And this is why the history of evil has gone on for so long. It is why God's efforts often fail, as we will soon discover in our study of human history. Then, if in order to prepare a foundation for the Messiah, God needs us to make a condition of indemnity that reverses the fall, we need to ask the question, what exactly happened in the fall that needs to be reversed? This is why it is so important to understand how we fell away from God. Basically, there are two things that we did in the fall that need to be reversed. Number one, the first mistake that was made in the fall is that Adam and Eve lost faith in God's commandment. God guided them to stay pure, to not eat the fruit, to not engage in the romantic sexual love. When they decided they didn't need to keep God's commandment, when they lost faith in it, it became impossible for them to fall. It became possible for them to fall. Number two, through illicit love, Eve's nature and then Adam's nature were both changed. The fall was not just a loss of faith, but the illicit acts of love that followed. For example, what if I drink and drive? If that is all I did and driving drunk I got arrested and lost my license, that can easily be corrected. However, if I drove drunk and got into an accident, what if I killed someone? Now discipline and apologies are not enough. This means when it comes to our responsibility to reverse the fall, it starts with faith, but faith is not enough. If faith were enough, we would have an ideal world a long time ago. Biblical figures like Noah and Abraham and Moses were men of great faith. But our world is still fallen. If we want to change the world, we have to also reverse our fallen nature. This has been one of the biggest challenges of history. And I'm sure as you seek to fulfill your own personal responsibility, you will discover how difficult it can be to reverse your fallen nature. Let's talk a little bit more about the condition of indemnity. To restore the loss of faith, to begin, God must choose someone to fulfill this task. We call this person a central person. Some of the central persons God has called in history include people like Abel, Noah, Abraham, Moses, the prophets, and Jesus. In the beginning, the central person is a man, not a woman. Woman will also play an important role in fulfilling humanity's portion of responsibility. And even the Messiah cannot fix what Adam and Eve broke without a woman. But it starts with a man. The responsibility of the central person whom God chooses is to fulfill a condition of faith that God is able to accept. To set the condition of faith, God uses time periods. For example, Moses was called on God to fast for 40 days. Jesus also fasted 40 days. And the Israelites were slaves for 400 years in Egypt. In these examples, God used the number 40 and 400. This is because in the fall, God lost the 4 positions. The 4 positions are God, man, woman, and child. Those 4 positions were to be the foundation upon which the ideal of creation was to be fulfilled. As we study God's work through history, you will see that there are other numbers that God used to set up the conditions of faith. Let's suppose someone fulfills this condition of faith. What more is needed in order to establish a foundation upon which God can send the Messiah? To complete the foundation for the Messiah, we must reverse our fallen nature, which is not something we do alone. It has to happen in a relationship. How does this work practically? Let's take a look at how God, after the fall, actually tried to establish a foundation for the Messiah in Adam's family. God wanted to send the Messiah as quickly as possible. God is our parent who loves us and who is suffering deeply because he lost his children. Naturally, he desperately wanted to send the Messiah and fix the mistake of Adam and Eve from the beginning, before sin would have a chance to multiply and corrupt the entire world. Therefore, God intended that Adam and Eve's children, Cain and Abel, reverse the fall and establish a foundation upon which God could send the Messiah. Who did God choose from Adam's family to be the central person to get things started by fulfilling a condition of faith? It was Abel, Adam and Eve's second son. Why Abel? God would have wanted to use Adam, but Adam is the very one who committed the original sin. And when God approached Adam, instead of repenting and taking responsibility, he blamed it all on Eve. God chose Abel rather than Cain, his older brother, because Abel was the younger son, the second born. The firstborn son, Cain, represented the lineage. When the father in a family dies, usually the elder son takes on that position. But in the case of the fallen family, the father's position was not God, but was a fallen archangel who had taken God's position. And so when the 2 brothers made an offering to God, God did not accept the offering of Cain, thus showing Cain the position he represented. Likewise, in order to show that Abel represented God's position, God accepted Abel's offering. In this case, the Bible does not tell us what the time period was, how long they had made offerings before God accepted Abel's offering. But the important point is that Abel did make an offering that was acceptable to God. When Cain's offering was rejected and Abel was received by God, Cain was really upset. Instead of coming to Abel and working together with him, he murdered him. He repeated the fall, but instead of killing Abel spiritually, he killed him physically. This is why the Messiah could not come to Adam's family. It took God a long time before he was able to try again at the time of Noah. But that is a story for a different session. What are some lessons we can learn from this session? First, God is not working randomly. Second, history has a goal as well as principles by which God is working to save his children, to restore us back to the ideal. Next point, these principles can be applied by each of us to our daily life. Thank you for coming today. In our next session, we will continue our study of history, how God did not give up with Adam's family, but continued to search for those people who could reverse the fall and prepare the necessary foundation for the Messiah.